It was an ordinary Tuesday morning at Lincoln Heights High School in Ohio. The sun had just begun to stream through the tall windows of room 214, illuminating the rows of desks neatly lined up for the day's lessons. Students chatted quietly among themselves, some doodling in notebooks, others sneaking glances at the clock, waiting for the bell. Everything seemed normal, too normal, as it would soon turn out. Teachers moved from desk to desk, handing out assignments and answering questions, completely unaware that by the end of the hour, 12 of their students would vanish without a trace. At exactly 10:15 a.m., the fire drill alarm sounded. It was a routine the students had followed countless times before: line up in silence, leave the classroom, and head to the designated safety zone outside. But when Mrs. Dalton, the teacher in charge, stepped out to check the hallway and guide the students, something was off. The hall was eerily quiet. The usual chatter and footsteps were missing. She called out for her students, her voice bouncing off the lockers, but only the sound of her own panic echoed back. Rushing back into room 214, Mrs. Dalton's heart sank. The classroom was completely empty. Desks were still in perfect order. Pencils and notebooks lay scattered as if the students had just vanished into thin air mid-activity. Chairs were pushed back slightly, indicating someone had been sitting there moments ago. But there was no sign of struggle, no footprints leading out, and not a single student in sight. Her scream brought other teachers running, and soon the entire school was in chaos. Students outside the classroom swore they had seen their friends line up for the drill, then vanish somewhere between the classroom and the schoolyard. The initial confusion quickly escalated into panic. Administrators called the police, and the school was immediately locked down. Parents poured in, faces pale with fear, demanding answers. "Where are our kids?" they shouted, some falling to their knees in the hallway, unable to comprehend how a simple fire drill could end in catastrophe. News crews arrived within hours, cameras rolling as they captured the sheer terror etched on the faces of everyone involved. The local community, usually quiet and peaceful, was thrust into a nightmare no one could explain. Detectives arrived and began scouring the school, searching for any clue that could explain the disappearances. They checked every nook and cranny, the gym, the cafeteria, the basement, even the roof, but found nothing. No doors forced open, no signs of abduction, no indication that the students had left voluntarily. It was as if the 12 of them had simply evaporated from existence. The town would never forget that day, and whispers began to circulate that the school itself held some dark secret, something that had waited decades for the right moment to strike. The moment the police arrived at Lincoln Heights High, it became clear this case would be unlike any they had encountered before. Detectives meticulously combed the building from top to bottom, moving through every classroom, the library, and the hallways that echoed with the ghostly silence of the vanished students. They checked every window, every door, even the crawl spaces beneath the school, hoping to find a clue, something, anything, that could explain the sudden disappearance. But every inch of the school seemed untouched, pristine, almost mockingly normal, as if daring them to find a trace of the missing children. Authorities expanded their search beyond the school grounds, scouring the surrounding neighborhood, nearby forests, and the river that ran a few blocks away. Search dogs were brought in, but they could not pick up a single scent. Helicopters circled overhead, scanning the terrain with heat sensors, yet the vast Ohio landscape yielded nothing. Families, desperate for answers, joined in the search, forming human chains through fields and alleyways. Still, the 12 students were gone, leaving behind only the memories of their laughter and the open, empty spaces in their classrooms. Interviews with teachers and staff revealed nothing. Mrs. Dalton insisted she had done everything by the book during the fire drill, and the other teachers' testimonies matched hers. Even the janitorial staff, who spent hours wandering the hallways and empty rooms, claimed they hadn't seen anything unusual. The police were baffled. Each lead seemed to vanish as quickly as the students had, leaving them chasing shadows and half-formed theories that dissolved under scrutiny. Local reporters amplified the mystery, highlighting the eerie perfection of the school day that had turned into a nightmare. Rumors began to spread through the town like wildfire. Some whispered that a local cult had targeted the children, while others spoke of supernatural forces dwelling within the old school building. Even parents who had held hope for their children began to fear the impossible, that their kids had simply disappeared into thin air, claimed by something that defied logic. Community meetings were held, but no one could offer a rational explanation, and the town's collective unease grew. Every creaking floorboard and flickering light became a source of suspicion, and the school, once a symbol of learning and safety, now felt like a place of lurking darkness. As weeks turned into months, the investigation slowly stalled. Leads went cold, evidence remained non-existent, and the missing students' names became a quiet mantra whispered in hallways and homes. Detectives who had dedicated countless hours to the case grew frustrated, some even claiming it was the strangest disappearance they had ever encountered. Yet, despite the lack of progress, a sense of foreboding lingered, as if the school itself knew something the investigators didn't. Something had happened in that building, and for all anyone knew, it might still be happening. Even after the initial shock of the disappearance faded, Lincoln Heights High School never returned to normal. Students who remained in the building spoke of strange things happening in the weeks and months that followed. Hallways that had once echoed with laughter now carried faint, indistinct whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Lockers would slam shut on their own, and lights flickered erratically, as if the building itself was alive and watching. Teachers reported feeling an unshakable chill in empty classrooms, and some swore they saw shadows moving along the walls when no one else was present. Parents began noticing changes in their children too. Some students said they felt uneasy, like someone, or something, was following them through the halls. One freshman claimed she could hear the 12 missing students calling her name during passing periods, their voices just faint enough to be almost believable. Another student reported finding her locker open in the morning, even though she had locked it the night before, and inside were notes written in handwriting she didn't recognize, filled with cryptic messages and strange symbols. The whispers in the building seemed to grow stronger each year, and the sense that something was not right became impossible to ignore. Teachers who had remained at the school were especially affected. Several began leaving abruptly, citing unexplained anxiety and vivid nightmares about the missing students. A janitor who had worked at the school for decades told a local reporter that the gym, in particular, felt different. He said, "It's like the floor hums at night, like it's trying to breathe, and sometimes, I swear I hear little footsteps beneath the boards." Even the most skeptical staff could not deny the growing unease that permeated the halls, as if the school itself were refusing to let the past disappear. Security cameras, installed after the initial disappearance, began capturing unusual activity. Footage showed fleeting shadows darting across hallways, classroom doors opening and closing with no one near them, and objects moving seemingly on their own. On one particularly eerie night, the cameras recorded a faint, ghostly glow emanating from the gymnasium floor, lasting only seconds before vanishing entirely. Investigators who reviewed the footage were left with more questions than answers, unable to determine whether it was a trick of the cameras or something truly unexplainable taking place within the school. As the years passed, the strange occurrences became part of the school's reputation. Students whispered stories of ghostly figures watching from corners, and parents often avoided walking near the school after dark. Even new staff members, unaware of the 1994 incident, reported inexplicable sensations, doors that wouldn't stay shut, lights that flickered when no one was in the room, and an oppressive feeling of being watched. The building had transformed from a place of learning into a haunted monument to the unsolved mystery, and everyone who entered could feel that the air itself carried the weight of a dark secret that refused to remain buried. It took 30 years for the truth to finally claw its way back into the light. In 2024, Lincoln Heights High School was scheduled for major renovations. The gym floor, worn and creaking from decades of use, was set to be replaced. As construction crews pried up the old wooden boards, they noticed something unusual, a strange outline in the concrete beneath, almost like a door had been deliberately hidden under layers of flooring. At first, they assumed it was an old utility hatch, something left over from decades of maintenance. But the moment they tried to open it, a cold gust of air escaped from the narrow crack, carrying with it a musty, metallic scent that made every worker pause. When authorities were called in, the building was sealed off. Police and city inspectors examined the hatch, pushing aside decades of dust and debris. It was a small, metal door, rusted and almost fused shut, as if it had been deliberately locked and abandoned for generations. No one could explain why it had never been discovered before. There were no blueprints, no records of a basement or hidden room, nothing to suggest that such a chamber even existed. The air around it was unnaturally cold, sending chills through anyone who dared to approach. Something about it felt wrong, as if the building itself was warning them to stay away. Finally, with heavy tools and careful effort, the door was forced open. What lay beyond was unlike anything the investigators had prepared for. The chamber was small, windowless, and coated in decades of dust and grime. The walls were bare concrete, but the floor was littered with personal belongings, backpacks, notebooks, and lunchboxes, items unmistakably belonging to the 12 missing students. It was a horrifying revelation, and the room seemed almost frozen in time, as though the students had simply been placed there and then forgotten. A sense of dread filled the air, pressing down on everyone who stepped inside, making it hard to breathe. Even more unsettling were the markings on the walls. Strange symbols, etched deep into the concrete, covered nearly every inch of space. Some resembled letters, others shapes, none of which anyone could identify. Paranormal investigators, historians, and police experts were all baffled. The markings seemed intentional, deliberate, and deeply ominous, like they were part of some ritual that had gone horribly wrong. The hidden chamber wasn't just a forgotten room. It was a space that seemed designed to contain something dark, waiting silently for decades. News of the discovery spread like wildfire. The town, long trying to forget the horrors of 1994, was suddenly reminded of the mystery they had tried to bury. Parents and former students returned to the school, some weeping at the thought that their children's belongings had been hidden there all these years. For those who had worked in the school, it was worse. The floorboards they had walked on every day had been concealing a terrifying secret beneath their feet, a secret that made every creak, every shadow, and every whisper from the past feel more real and more dangerous than ever before. As the heavy metal door creaked open, the investigators stepped into the hidden chamber, and the first thing that hit them was the stale, suffocating air. It smelled of rust, damp concrete, and something far more unsettling, an almost tangible presence of fear. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing the walls covered in layers of dust and strange markings, but it was the floor that told the real story. Scattered across it were backpacks, textbooks, shoes, and even lunchboxes, all worn and faded from decades of neglect. It was a haunting sight, personal items that belonged to children who had disappeared 30 years ago, frozen in a moment that no one could explain. One of the detectives bent down to examine a notebook left open on the floor. The pages were yellowed and brittle, but the handwriting was unmistakable: names, doodles, and half-written diary entries from the missing students. Some pages contained desperate notes. "I can't see anyone, it's so dark," or "Please help me, someone is watching." The sense of utter abandonment in these writings sent chills down everyone's spine. It was as if the students had been aware of some unseen danger, but there was no escape, and no one had ever come for them. In one corner of the chamber, they found a small, broken desk pushed against the wall. On it lay a rusted, tarnished locket, the kind children often wore as keepsakes. Inside were tiny photographs of the students, arranged meticulously. Whoever had placed it here seemed to have known exactly what they were doing. The presence of these personal items, carefully arranged yet untouched for decades, made it feel less like an accident and more like a deliberate imprisonment, a room designed to contain more than just objects. It had held the children themselves. As the investigators explored further, they noticed the walls were not merely marked. They were etched with symbols and strange patterns that seemed almost alive under the flickering flashlight beams. The symbols were primitive, yet intricate, forming shapes that suggested some kind of ritual. A faint scratchy noise seemed to echo off the concrete walls, a whisper of movement that couldn't possibly be human. The room itself seemed to hum, a low vibration in the floorboards that made the hair on the back of their necks stand on end. Everyone felt it. The chamber was more than a hiding place. It was a trap, a container of something far darker than anyone could imagine. Finally, they discovered a small hatch in the far corner, hidden beneath a pile of debris. It was nearly invisible, covered with dirt and age, but it led to a narrow tunnel descending deeper into darkness. The hatch suggested that the chamber was only the first part of something much larger, a secret that had been meticulously buried and left untouched for 30 years. Whoever had built this hidden room had planned for it to remain a secret indefinitely, and now, standing in its suffocating darkness, the investigators realized they had only just begun to uncover the full horror of what had been happening beneath the school. Amid the scattered belongings in the hidden chamber, one item drew the investigators' attention more than any other: a small, leather-bound diary, its edges frayed and pages yellowed with age. The diary belonged to Harold Thompson, a janitor who had worked at Lincoln Heights High in the early 1990s. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary record of daily routines, but as they flipped through the pages, it became chillingly clear that Harold had documented strange and disturbing events long before the students disappeared. His entries spoke of shadows that moved independently, whispers echoing in empty hallways, and an unsettling presence in the gymnasium basement. As the detectives read further, the diary revealed something far more sinister. Harold wrote about a hidden space beneath the gym that he had discovered while performing routine maintenance. He described it as a pocket of darkness that watches you, a place where time seemed to distort and reality felt fragile. His handwriting grew erratic as he recounted nights spent hearing the children's voices calling from the shadows, their pleas echoing in his ears. Each entry became increasingly frantic, hinting that he feared the school itself was alive with something malevolent, something that had claimed the students and was waiting to claim more. The diary also contained sketches, rough, childlike drawings that mapped the floor beneath the gym and included symbols identical to those etched on the hidden chamber walls. Some drawings depicted stick figures trapped inside boxes or circles, accompanied by jagged, cryptic markings. Experts later concluded that the symbols resembled ancient ritualistic patterns, though no one could identify their exact origin. The implication was horrifying. The students had not simply vanished. They had been placed or trapped as part of a ritual, and Harold Thompson had known enough to fear the consequences but not enough to stop it. Harold's final entries were the most disturbing. He wrote about a presence that whispered to him, promising power and warning him to stay silent. He admitted to hiding small objects and markings around the school, hoping they might one day reveal the truth to someone brave enough to uncover it. His words conveyed a palpable sense of dread, as though he had witnessed the impossible and barely escaped. For investigators, it was both a clue and a warning. The hidden chamber was not an isolated anomaly. It was part of something far larger, something deliberately designed to keep the darkness contained and alive. Even now, experts examining the diary remain unsettled. The entries suggest that the school was not simply a location. It was a locus for something supernatural, something that defied logic, space, and perhaps even time. The investigators realized that the diary was more than a record. It was a guide, a fragmented warning, a key to understanding why the students vanished and why the chamber existed. Each page seemed to whisper the same terrifying truth. The horror beneath the gym was still very real, and still very active, even decades later. The discovery of the hidden chamber sent shockwaves through Lincoln Heights almost instantly. Residents who had long tried to forget the 1994 disappearances now faced a terrifying reality. The school they had trusted to educate their children had been harboring a decades-old secret, and it was far worse than anyone had imagined. Parents rushed to the site, hoping against hope to see some sign of their lost children, only to find the chamber filled with belongings and cryptic markings. The scene was surreal, like stepping into a nightmare frozen in time, and the air was thick with fear and disbelief. Former students and faculty returned, many of them overcome with a mixture of grief and anger. Some wept openly at the sight of backpacks and notebooks, recognizing their friends' handwriting and personal items. Others whispered about the strange occurrences they had witnessed over the years, doors slamming, shadows moving, and voices echoing in empty halls. The town realized, painfully, that what they had dismissed as paranoia or coincidence was real. The school itself had been a vessel for something dark, something that had claimed their children and refused to release them. Local authorities acted quickly to secure the site, but the sense of unease could not be contained. Paranormal investigators, historians, and journalists flocked to Lincoln Heights, drawn by the mystery and the horror. As they examined the chamber and the diary, they uncovered a pattern. The disappearances were not random. The hidden chamber, the strange symbols, and the items left behind all suggested a deliberate design, a sinister plan orchestrated by forces that no one fully understood. Townspeople began reporting odd sensations near the school: cold drafts in the air, fleeting glimpses of figures in the windows, and the eerie sound of children laughing beneath the gym floor. The psychological toll on the community was immense. Generations who had grown up in the area now approached the school with fear. Children refused to walk past it, and teachers who had worked there before the discovery quit, citing unexplainable anxiety and nightmares of what might still linger in the darkness beneath the floorboards. Even local law enforcement admitted that the case had ventured beyond their experience. This was no ordinary missing persons investigation. The town had to confront a chilling possibility, that the school itself was haunted, cursed, or alive with something malevolent, something that might never be fully understood. Despite the physical closure of the school and the sealing of the hidden chamber, Lincoln Heights was forever changed. Whispers persisted in the community, stories of children's voices in empty hallways and shadows flitting across classrooms after hours. Families who had lost loved ones could never fully move on, and a dark curiosity gripped the town. What else might be hidden beneath the floors, waiting to be uncovered? The discovery forced everyone to acknowledge a terrifying truth. The events of 1994 had left a scar, one that was visible not in broken walls or missing students, but in the lingering presence of fear itself. Even decades later, the hidden chamber beneath Lincoln Heights High remains sealed, but the echoes of the past refuse to stay silent. Some nights, neighbors report hearing faint whispers and laughter drifting from the school grounds. Others claim to see shadows moving behind boarded-up windows, fleeting figures that vanish the moment anyone approaches. No one knows exactly what happened to the 12 students, or if they are still trapped somewhere beneath the gym. Experts and investigators can only speculate, but one thing is certain. The school holds a secret far darker than anyone imagined, a secret that time has not erased. And while the town tries to move forward, the fear lingers, a reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be solved. So, the question remains, if you ever walk past an old school late at night, listen carefully. You might just hear the children calling from the shadows, waiting for someone to finally uncover the truth.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.